everybody. I'm Dinda Elliott, the Executive Director at the Fairbank Center. And I just wanted to sort of frame this talk, today's talk, a little tiny bit before handing it over to our speaker. These are tough times for people in China who are practicing Islam or Christianity or any other religion that might be deemed to be too independent from the Communist Party. And yet there are millions of Chinese who still practice religion. Why? If Mao Zedong declared religion the opiate of the masses, then why are so many people still flocking to religion? In recent years, the Chinese government's Sinicization efforts have put pressure on Islam, Catholicism, and Protestantism across the country. Mosques have been closed, and crosses have been removed from churches. But neither political pressures nor the forces of modernization have eradicated religious influence in China. Rather, religious life in China endures and adapts. Why is the Chinese government afraid of these independent forces? And what can we understand from the government's efforts to control them? Today, we're just delighted to have an expert to help us examine the post-Mao reemergence of religion in China, to think about what it means, and to explore what the government's more recent crackdowns tell us about China today. Jianbo Huang is professor of anthropology at East China Normal University and director of the Institute of Anthropology and the Center of Ethnicity and Development. Professor Huang also teaches at NYU in Shanghai. He's done extensive research on Christianity in contemporary China. Before joining ECNU in 2014, he'd been a faculty member of the Anthropology Institute at Renmin University of China since 2005, and after receiving his PhD in anthropology from Central Minzu University in 2003, Professor Huang was a postdoc fellow at the Institute of Anthropology and Ethnology at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. In 2003 and 2005, and at the Institute of Studies of Religion, Baylor University in 2007, 2008. He was named as Shanghai Shuguang Scholar in 2015. We are also thrilled that joining Professor Huang in conversation today is Professor Susan Greenhalgh, Professor of Anthropology at John King and Wilma Cannon Fairbank, Professor of Chinese Society Emerita at Harvard University. Professor Greenhalgh researches contemporary Chinese society, in particular the one-child policy, but many, many other subjects as well. And she's been conducting independent research in China's countryside since the 1980s. So, Professor Huang, over to you. Thanks so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm more than honored to have this opportunity here today to share some of my observations about religion in China. So, the year could be 2025 or 2024 or any year in Shanghai or in some other cities. Construction cranes paint a relentless picture of progress against the sky. The symphony of steel echoing the city's relentless expansion. A gleaming skyscraper, just like this, a testament to modern architectural progress, nears completion. Its design, lauded for its sleek efficiency, maximizes light and space, yet unknown to most admiring its outward brilliance. The building's very foundation rests on a carefully placed compass, ensuring its alignment with the auspicious flow of qi, vital energy, as dictated by feng shui. I would say this story is not uncommon in China. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, in a dimly-lit basement or another small room, a different kind of construction unfolds. Here, the building is not of steel and glass, but of faith and whispered prayers. An underground Christian house church holds a clandestine Sunday service, its members risking legal repercussions for their devotion. Both things, seemingly worlds apart, highlight the central question of this presentation here today. Can China truly function without religion? The simplistic answer, often presented in the context of a rapidly modernizing, increasingly secular nation, is frequently a resounding yes. Official statistics often downplay the prevalence of religious practice, emphasizing a secular state narrative. Yet, this narrative failed to grasp the multifaceted reality of spirituality within China's diverse cultural landscape. The skyscraper's feng shui campus we just mentioned, and the hidden church's clandestine service expose the inadequacy of such a simplistic perspective. These two stories, one of overt modernity subtly infused with the ancient tradition, the other of covert faith defying state control, vividly illustrate the complex interplay between official narratives, individual spiritual needs, and the diverse manifestations of faith within China. The Shanghai skyscraper's incorporation of feng shui, a practice deeply rooted in Chinese cosmology, serves as a powerful example of the subtle integration of spiritual beliefs into seemingly secular aspects of life. The architect's decision, likely driven by a desire to maximize the building's success, reflects a persistent cultural inclination toward aligning actions with the perceived flow of cosmic energy. This seemingly programmatic choice highlights a fundamental point. Even within a modernizing context, spiritual beliefs and practices continue to be shaping decisions and behaviors, often implicitly rather than overtly. In stark contrast, the underground Christian house church's clandestine service underscores the resilience of faith in the face of state control. The hidden community, risking legal repercussions, chooses to prioritize their religious observance above potential consequences. The very existence of this clandestine congregation serves as a direct challenge to the official narrative of a purely secular society. Their choice to gather in secret underscores the strength of their belief and the enduring human need for spiritual meaning and community. This presentation today will delve into the intricacies of this seemingly paradoxical relationship. It will move beyond the limitations of a binary yes-no answer, exploring the nuanced interplay of state policies, individual spiritual needs, and the diverse forms of religious and spiritual expression within China. We will examine the official definition of religion, analyze the impact of state control on religious practices, and investigate the prevalence of diffused religious beliefs integrated into everyday life. Ultimately, we will seek to construct a more comprehensive understanding of the dynamic relationship between religion and society in China, recognizing the enduring power of faith, even within a context of a rapid modernization and significant state influences. As we just shared earlier, the skyscraper and the hidden church, though seemingly disparate, stand as a powerful symbol of this enduring, complex, and ultimately irreplaceable dimension of Chinese life. So let's turn first to the question we asked in the first place. Can China live or function well without religion? As we said earlier, a rather quick answer could be yes, if. Here, religion only refers to the so-called 5 religions. And even only the religious professionals or clergymen, who counts only about 400,000 nationwide. The seemingly simple question of whether China can function without religion is actually complicated by the very definition of religion within the Chinese context. A straightforward application of Western frameworks risks misinterpreting the nuanced and fluid nature of spirituality in China. But even if we take the term religion in its limited sense, we may still see the important role of religion in China. Though religion in China is usually not in the spotlight, largely because religion is much underreported and mostly depicted as something related to other dimensions. For example, in the case of Islam and Tibetan Buddhism, were more under the category of ethnic affairs, or something related to national security and state unity. And then that falls into the jurisdiction of PSB or NSB instead of the Religious Affairs Bureau. I would argue neglecting or even pretending the absence of religion factor may make the issues more problematic and less likely to deal with. 基督教 and 天主教 are problematic in a quite different way, more to do with their international relationship, particularly with the Western countries, and particularly with the US. It raised more of a loyalty question, both in political sense and cultural sense. Anyways, religion, if we are honest to the reality, is very important and has very high stakes. What is more, it is not just instrumental, but also crucial in ordinary people's life and in many aspects of the state and of the society, as well as all of which actually demands more attention and careful research. So the Chinese government official recognition of 5 major religions, as we list here, provides a seemingly straightforward framework. However, this categorization presents a severely limited view. The 5 religions framework, while probably providing a starting point, inherently exclude a wide range of spiritual practices. Folk religions, ancestral veneration, and other forms of diffused spirituality remain influential, often escaping official categorization. This limited official recognition obscures the full spectrum of religious and spiritual life in China. Please be noted that here I used the Chinese pinyin, 宗教 and 教 to emphasize the very fact that 宗教 is quite different from the term religion. In short, religion in this sense is quite limited and confined to a very marginal space, as probably a small or closely watched part of a bigger society. Religion is for sure not as important as political or economic dimension, just as the marginal status of the State Bureau of Religious Affairs in the government apparatus. Actually, this bureau was actually incorporated with the Department of United Front just a few years ago. The term 宗教, often translated as religion, believed as first translated by Japanese, lacks the clear-cut theological connotations associated with its Western counterpart. Its etymology reveals its historical evolution significantly shaped by the arrival of Western missionaries. The original components, 宗, implying lineage or ancestry, and 教, suggesting teaching or doctrines, reflect the importance of ancestral veneration and structural moral frameworks in traditional Chinese thought. However, the introduction of Western missionary efforts in the 19th and 20th century necessitated a categorization system to understand the diverse spiritual practices encountered. The adoption of 宗教 as a general term, therefore, imposed a Western framework onto a system fundamentally different in a in structure and functions. The imposition has profound implications. Western conceptions of religion often entail a distinct separation between the sacred and the secular, clearly defined religious institution and a structural belief system. While in traditional Chinese spirituality, it displayed a fluid interplay between these aspects. Spiritual practices were often seamlessly integrated into daily life, intertwined with the social customs, familial rituals, and even agricultural practices. So applying the term 宗教 risks overlooking the fundamental difference, potentially misinterpreting the flexible and adaptable nature of Chinese spiritual expression. And the inherent ambiguity is further underscored by comparing 宗教 to terms like 生活, life, and 信念, because spiritual practices aren't always compartmentalized as distinct religious activities. They are often intrinsically linked to the everyday experience of life. Similarly, 信念, belief, encompassing core beliefs and convictions, embraces a wider range of values and convictions that may not align with the formally recognized religious institutions. Numerous practices fall under 教 without being officially categorized as 宗教. Deeply embedded in local customs and traditions, these practices significantly shape individual beliefs and community life. Divination, fortune-telling, folk healings, and ancestor veneration are examples of such practices, often incorporating elements from officially recognized religion, but existing outside their formal structures. Here we will not get into the debate about the nature of Confucianism and Taoism, but simply say that they provide moral and philosophical frameworks that deeply influence the lives of many, demonstrating the multifaceted nature of spirituality in China. And an integrated approach, rather than a focus solely on institutionalized religion, is crucial for a complete understanding of spirituality within contemporary Chinese society. So to sum this part up, I'd like to bring up the fact once there was a heated debate, does China have religion? And I believe all of us here know about that, and we will not discuss in detail here. Now, one of the useful investigation or perspective, though still simplistic and sometimes problematic too, is C.K. Yang's well-known typology, institutional and diffuse religion. Anyway, as a result of the previous discussed confusion about religion, China is reported as the lowest religious country, while most researchers believe the actual religious practitioners are much higher, due to the definition of religion and also the negative connotation of the Chinese term 宗教. And for sure, the systematic social and political discrimination against religion is the general social context. Another important point is, in the eyes of the authority, religion needs to be 管理, or governed, or controlled, or regulated, because religion is considered as potentially dangerous, especially in the case of Islam 教, 基督教 and 天主教, either still considered largely foreign, or at least foreign related. And also religion by default is false, according to the Chinese orthodoxy Marxism. And party members actually are not allowed to be religious, at least on paper, though in reality, many cadres are discreetly practicing certain kinds of belief or religions. Thus, we may understand partly why the reported religious affiliation numbers are very low in China, because 信教, believing, and belonging to a religious group, affiliation, are distinctively two things, and Xinjiao could be very personal, even private. Understanding this complex interplay requires exploring the social and psychological dimensions of religious belief and practice, examining how they intersect with the societal challenges, mental health, and emerging social phenomena. Actually, human beings possess an inherent need for meaning and purpose. In China, traditional belief systems have historically provided this framework, offering explanation for the universe mysteries, the cyclical nature of life and death, and ethical guidelines for living a virtuous life. While modernization and the rapid economic growth of recent decades, however, have disrupted the traditional social structures and challenged the established belief systems, the resulting existential anxieties, coupled with the pressures of intense competition and societal expectations, have created a void that may seek to fill. The social function of religious communities is equally significant. Religious groups traditionally provided crucial social support networks, offering a sense of belonging and shared identity, especially in rural communities. These networks extended beyond mere spiritual guidance, encompassing practical assistance, mutual aid, and community building activities. The state's control over religious organizations has inevitably impacted the strength of these frameworks. But informal religious practices and underground religious communities continue to provide a sense of a community and support for their members. The informal nature of these groups, however, means that they are largely invisible to official statistics. Religion often serves as a powerful coping mechanism, providing individuals with the strategies to navigate stress, trauma, and adversity. Prayer, meditation, ritualistic observance, and the belief in a higher power can offer solace and comfort during challenging times. These coping mechanisms are particularly vital in a rapidly changing society where traditional sources of support may be eroding. Religion is not confined to the purely personal realm, actually. It inevitably interacts with the social and political issues. The role of religion in social unrest and political dissent is equally multifaceted. While the state strictly controls religious organizations to prevent them from challenging its authority, religious communities have occasionally played a role in social movements. Religious beliefs can inspire activism and provide a moral framework for social justice and political reform. But these actions must be carefully managed to avoid persecution. The availability and accessibility of a mental health care service in China is also a crucial factor that needs to be considered when evaluating the overall impact of religious belief on mental health. Many people actually lack access to appropriate mental health services. It is estimated that there are about 95 million people suffering from depression in China, while the WHO statistics say about 350 million with depressions worldwide. And according to People's Daily, actually, 24% of youth are with some kind of depression. What is more, Professor Lu Ning, a prominent Chinese Academy of Science fellow, said during the 3 years of a pandemic, newly found 70 million with depression, 90 million with anxiety, and hundreds of millions suffering from sleep disorders. And this may take at least 20 years to digest. The emergence of a social phenomenon like lying flat, Chinese people here are very familiar with that, 内卷 and 躺平, and also 45-degree life, which means if either you can 内卷 or lying flat. It's in a very awkward position. Reflects a growing disillusionment with the relentless pursuit of materialistic success and hyper-competitiveness in modern Chinese society. While not explicitly religious movements, these trends hint at an underlying search for alternative meanings and values. So at the personal level, we can see varieties of spiritual practices, in fact. For example, Taoism, or at least in the name of Taoism, that's for many people who might be familiar with the famous Hong Kong movie, ghost movie series, and Buddhism. And the right side picture is actually Jing'an in the center of Shanghai. And also the parade of deities in Fujian. So it's a big thing. And also I would say even bigger right now. And also sending off the king's ship. And singing bowls and energy healing and all varieties of spiritual practices. So in conclusion of this part, the social and the psychological dimensions of religion in China are complex and intertwined with the various aspects of the nation's political and social landscape. While the state actively controls and regulates religious institutions, the enduring human need for spiritual meaning and fulfillment continues to manifest in numerous ways, both within the confines of state-sanctioned religion and through informal practices, underground movements, and also evolving social phenomena. We began the presentation by asking, can China live without religion? Here, we may need a pause and ask two questions about the question itself. Go where and for what? Because our focus here is actually not the abstract concept of China, just as a political and geographical entity. Instead, I would argue Chinese people as living persons is our primary concern here. And we may all heard about this quote, slow down and wait for your souls. Whether this quote is from India or actually North American Indian, we may find a similar expression in Christian traditions as well. For what is a man's profit if he shall gain the whole world? The influence of religion in China extends far beyond individual spirituality, weaving a complex tapestry through the fabric of society. Historically, religious institutions served as crucial pillars of social cohesion in China. These religious organizations function as a community hubs, fostering social interactions, mutual support, and conflict mediation. Shared rituals and beliefs reinforce communal bonds, offering a framework for resolving disputes and fostering a sense of a collective identity that transcended economic or social divisions. Traditional practices like ancestral veneration further strengthened family ties and intergenerational connections, contributing to social stability. And for centuries, religion, values, and teachings have shaped the moral and ethical compass of Chinese society. And even the relationship between religion and economic development in China is also intricate. While the state promotes a secular model of economic growth, religious beliefs and practices can influence economic activities in several ways. Religious communities often provide social services and microfinancing, particularly in rural areas, aiding economic development at the local level. Furthermore, religious values such as hard work, thrift, and community cooperation can contribute to economic productivity. Furthermore, religion is not only just about human beings, but also non-humans and nature. A larger context for us to understand and in pursuit of human flourishing. In recent years, a growing convergence between religious beliefs and environmental protections has become apparent. Some religious communities are actively involved in environmental activism, advocating for conservation and sustainable practices. And here we can see two illustrations. That, the Secret Mountain, that's a Kanzen Bochi in Tibet, and another one is a sacred tree worship in Wa people in Yunnan. So in conclusion of this part, the influence of religion in contemporary China, not only just the historical, is not merely a matter of individual faith, but it extends to the core of its societal fabric. While the state's control and suppression efforts have significantly altered the traditional role of religious institutions, the enduring power of religious beliefs and practices continue to impact social dynamics, moral frameworks, economic activities, and even environmental consciousness. The exploration of religion's role in China, in Chinese society, reveals a complex and a dynamic relationship, as we just showed, far removed from a simplistic dichotomy of religious versus the secular. Contrary to the notion of purely secular China, our analysis suggests that the nation cannot truly function or live well without religion. Even if the forms and expressions of religion are significantly altered and often concealed, the enduring influence of religious beliefs and practices, both overt and covert, fundamentally shapes the moral compass, social structure, and even the economic trajectory of China. So what is more, we can see faith and practice is not only just in the religious sites or organizations, it's everywhere in everyday life. The left picture actually shows a story which is widely told that the most religious group in China probably is the urban elites in financial district of Shanghai, because they count a lot on all kinds of religious practice in hoping of making a fortune. I don't know if that's true here in the United States or Wall Street, okay? And the second, the middle picture is a man wearing crimson qipao, which is a skirt for women to express the best wish of luck for his kid in the college entrance exam. And the last picture actually shows a scientist praying some kind of a prayer in a science lab, praying for a successful experiment. You might say this is not really a religion, but actually the popularity of Chikawa, a Japanese cartoon character, also reflects the emotional needs and the psychological state of the modern young people in China, particularly in a social environment characterized by stress and uncertainty. The aesthetic of cuteness and healing essentially provide an emotional refuge, allowing individuals to temporarily escape from the complexities and the burden of reality. And Jellycat, which is a British toy brand, just a few months ago, a large store of Jellycat just opened in the center of Shanghai. And many young people queued for hours trying to purchase one Jellycat. And in a media interview, some young shoppers expressed that purchasing these products provided them with this sense of emotional healing. And one customer actually stated, it feels warm and healing. Having those fluffy toys at home feels like having family around. And DeepSeek, which is a high-tech, right? The newly developed, kind of a Chinese counterpart version of ChatGPT, will even better, someone say. But anyway, DeepSeek could be also used for fortune telling. Actually, I found some interesting prompts from the internet. It goes like this: you are a master of Bazi astrology, deeply versed in the techniques of Bazi, and always willing to share your knowledge openly. And then here's some, what my request is. From the perspective of Bazi, could you analyze my work situation in the year of 2025? Will there be a turning point? Will there be opportunities for promotion and salary increases? If so, how should I seize them? So please combine Bazi, astrology, and industry conditions and other relevant factors to provide a clear, concise, and insightful answer to my question, along with advice. The following 3 slides actually is about a legal case of a city god's judgment taken from the Qing dynasty. Here we only pointed out that city god's judgment was not only true in history, yes, but we can find similar things even today. Like here, we can see, for example, there's a governmental office in Fujian named as Mazu Pinli Shi, means the Mazu Conflict Resolution Room. And arguably, the most respected star in Fujian probably is actress Liu Tao, who is depicted in the look of Mazu. And just a few weeks ago, a statue of Mazu was taking a flight to Beijing, even with her own boarding pass. I don't have enough time here, but actually I have a 3 minutes video clip here showing the Yi people in the southwest China. They actually used rituals to overcome drug addiction, which is a very powerful story. I watched this video, numerous times, but each time I feel, inspired. And we not only just in the history, not only just in the countryside, but also let's take a look back in the modern cities. It is evident to say that there is a spiritual crisis of the middle class, and also in turn there is a rise of spiritual healing circles as well. And these new forms of spirituality actually, we can see a lot of expansion of various spiritual courses, meditation apps, healings, and mind, body, spirit communities. And these could be some kind of a religious alternative. It satisfies people's pursuit of transcendence without imposing the strict doctrine or institutional constraints of traditional religions. And the following slides are actually kind of a shameless self-promotion, so I just skip it. Basically, some research I've been working on recently. Anyway, so far, it is clear that religion in China is a complex issue, characterized by many seemingly contradictory aspects that demand a more nuanced understanding. while reports indicate a low level of religious affiliation, spiritual engagement remains high. Although the government officially identifies as atheist, many party members and officials are often discreetly involved in various religious activities. This involvement, though more of an open secret, can influence how state policies on religious affairs are interpreted and implemented. The state maintains a close watch on all aspects of society, including religion. Over the past 20 to 30 years, folk beliefs and practices have gained recognition as traditional knowledge at the local level, just we would say Mazu. Such traditions are often framed within the discourse of a popular discourse called intangible cultural heritage. In many instances, these practices are actively promoted as a means of cultivating cultural pride and a connection to historical roots. Aligning with the nationalist Renaissance movement, Taoism and Buddhism, particularly, are frequently incorporated into the grand narrative of China and are depicted as cultural exports. While the state claims to be neutral toward all religions, evidence shows a varied attitude across different belief systems. It's important to remember that the state apparatus is operated by real individuals. So as a result, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism are often regarded as our own religions, with the encouragement for their promotion as a counterbalance to the influence of foreign religions, especially Christianity. So the term ecology of religion, 宗教生态学, though much debated, has been frequently used among officials and scholars. This context explains the prevalence of reports on traditional religious practices, such as what we've just seen, the ritual honoring Mazu, sacred mountains, and the Tiger Day of the Yi people, and so forth. In contrast, coverage of other religious events tends to be sparse, often out of concern for potential backlash and scrutiny. Ultimately, the topic of religion in China is intricate, as we said. Both narratives of religious freedom and restriction hold truth, though these experiences can vary widely from one religion to another and from one situation to another. So to sum up, the enduring presence of religion in China challenges simplistic narratives of a purely secular state. The state's control and suppression efforts, while significant, have not eradicated the fundamental human need for spiritual meaning, social cohesion, and moral guidance. Religion's influence, though often subtle and concealed, permeate the fabric of Chinese society, shaping ethical frameworks, influencing social dynamics, and impacting even economic development. The ongoing struggle between state control and the persistent human desire of faith creates a dynamic and ever-evolving landscape, demanding continuous scrutiny and further investigation. And the future of religion in China is not one of a simple disappearance, but rather a complex interplay of adaptation, resilience, and ongoing tension between faith and state power, a testament to the enduring power of belief in the face of adversity. In fact, just as Marx noted, religion predates the state. Throughout human history, as long as we remain individuals with the feelings and beliefs, not merely machines or cogs within a larger system, religion and spirituality will remain integral to society. Humans are inherently social beings, and this spirituality is an inseparable part of our existence. So in short, maybe unseen or underreported, religion in China is in fact widespread in social life. And secondly, religion is meaningful for a large number of Chinese people. religion, and thirdly, religion in a broader sense is critical for the well-being of people and society, and even plays deep and fundamental roles. So, finally, back to the question we asked in the beginning. Can China live without religion? Now we come to a possible short answer. No. Thank you.
How much time do we have? 0? Oh, we have 15 minutes until quarter after. Oh, great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for raising one of the oldest and thorniest questions. Is it on? Yep. Thank you. Thank you for raising one of the oldest and thorniest questions in the study of Chinese culture and for giving us all so much to think about. I really learned a lot. I love the section about etymology, where the religion Songjiao, where it came from, what it really means. But people will have a lot of questions. So I am just going to take the opportunity to jumpstart the Q&A and ask one of my own, and then call on others to ask their questions. So you argue very helpfully, I think, for blurring the boundary between religious and secular practices. That's one of the main points in your talk. But I was thinking that there might be another divide that could usefully be questioned. You say that the state reshaped institutions, religious institutions, but beliefs and practices persisted in creative and informal ways. So that implies two domains, a domain with the state and then a domain with society, as though state and society were somehow separate. There's tons of evidence for state control of the formal institutions of religion in society. But I would suggest that the state also is quietly managing these other domains that you've described as informal. All these practices that you've shown, I should think, require state or party approval. For example, the Parade of Deities in Fujian, surely the organizers had to get the approval of local officials to conduct that. And you can think of examples where party-state authorization would have been necessary for all of these cases that you gave. It seems to me if the party state were disapproving, then few, if any, of these would persist because the state has all the cards in its hands right now. So what I'm suggesting is perhaps the state is tacitly tolerating all these practices and even encouraging them, because it helps ease these incredible tensions that are swirling around Chinese society, living in a time of incredibly challenging political, economic change. So all these practices are actually helping the state, and by looking the other way, or by agreeing to the sale of all these products that people are using, Taoist, Buddhist, so many products. Look at the incredible amount of money being spent on these practices. That means people are buying things, and that means the state is allowing their sale. So the state is at least tacitly, if not actively, encouraging a lot of this activity, which you've seen as informal. And so actually, if one were interested in this hypothesis, you could study it by examining state discourse. Look at state discourses on cultural matters. See what it says. See if there are gaps when it comes to those kinds of informal Buddhist, Taoist, etc. practices. Also, you could look at what state officials are doing themselves in the area of these practices, because if they were engaging with them, which I bet many of them are, then they could be sanctioned by their colleagues, which doesn't seem likely. So I'll stop there. Yeah, why don't you answer quickly if you can.
Thank you.
So other people can ask questions.
Well, thank you very, very much for your insights and suggestions for future research. I just quickly respond to the first point, especially. I totally agree with you. Just the separation between the state versus the unregistered or the non-state or out of the state actually sometimes problematic. And I would say, as trained as an anthropologist, I try to kind of sometimes ignore those or try to overcome this dichotomy. In fact, I would add two more kind of footnotes to your points. One is house church in China, especially in Wenzhou, because we all know there are two types of church in China, Christian church in China. One is registered or official, and the other one is unregistered or called a house church. Because the registered church, sometimes we also call them, three self church, 三字, three self. But actually, in reality, this dichotomy sometimes doesn't work at all, particularly in some places in Wenzhou. In that many churches actually in Wenzhou, they are either totally official or totally officially recognized, or completely outside of the state control. So these churches actually sometimes they were joked as 不三不四的教会. They are either or, okay, either or. And secondly, in fact, traditionally in China, actually, we have this dichotomy between Jianbo and Caoting, the society versus the court or the state. We have, a lot of stories and also examples to show this distinction sometimes doesn't work. And we've seen a lot of kind of a replicate of the Jianbo or the society of the Caoting, of the state system. And a lot of things, just like, say, for Chinese people, we all know 梁山好汉. Actually, they also kind of a copycat of the state system. So I totally agree with you about that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Open for questions now. Here's a question.
Thank you, Professor. Can I ask the question first in Chinese and then in English?
Identify.
Okay, yes. My name is Xi Wang from Harvard Graduation School of Education. 教授，谢谢您发言。我想有个问题就是说，当我们谈到日常中的宗教，或者是任何的这种所谓的灵性的东西，如果我跟我父母谈起来，他们会有很强烈的抵抗的情绪，就觉得这就是迷信。那我就想问一下，您觉得这是因为刚刚说的 state control 造成的这种 stigmatization of anything religious or spiritual， 或者还是只是因为就是像那些什么求锦鲤的那些人，他们确实是less 就是心不是那么诚，就是您会觉得，或者说您有任何的 comment? Okay, so my question was like, I notice in daily life, my parents, whenever I talk about anything remotely related to religion or spiritual practice, like the mind body science, they would be very resistant. And I felt like, and I was just wondering if this is because of the state's control that religion has been stigmatized. They think this is not scientific. So it's really hard for them to like really open the conversation about that. And I was just wondering if Professor could comment on that.
Thank you. Well, I said a little bit in the presentation, but what I was trying to say is state influence is definitely a major factor here. But in fact, what I was trying to say is also the negative connotation of 宗教, the term itself, actually influences a lot. Because in China, for many people, 宗教 is directly related to 迷信. These two are always kind of linked together, which means you are not educated or less educated, which means you are unreasonable even. And morally speaking, then means you are either bad as a person yourself, or easy or susceptible, easy to be cheated by some others, because you are 迷信 means you just trust in someone, you cannot trust, basically. So I think the negative connotation is something I would argue, in fact, plays more, important role than just those, as organizational, or the political influence. So that's what, in fact, what I was trying to say. I totally get your question. In fact, that's also my parents and other friends when they react when I talk about religion. Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor Huang, for your presentation. I'm a PhD student at School of Education. My name is Liz. And my question is, I heard from your presentation that there are certain religions that are allowed or even encouraged or being taken advantage of by the central government for cultural promotion purposes or economic development. And there are certain religions that are considered less, less acceptable or like more dangerous, as you mentioned, Christianity, or I guess maybe Tibetan Buddhism. So my question is, when you talk about enduring religious practice and building resilience for religion to be in this modern China, in this highly centralized environment, have you seen practices that for the more foreign religions to have that resilience to endure in today's China? Thank you.
First, quickly respond to your first observation and point. I agree with you. There are kind of, as I said, different attitudes towards religion. But in general, still, as at least officially, the state claims as atheist. So in general, suspicious or by default, religion is not as, not scientific or not as good as Marxist ideology. But because in China, we need also understand there are actually two things working together. Besides Marxism, we also have a very strong sentiment of nationalism. And that contributes to the fact that we just mentioned. Because the government apparatus actually are operated by people, Chinese people, and they are more familiar with the traditional Chinese, religious thought. So, in practice and in their understanding and implementation, actually they could be more friendly to a certain type of religion and promote even. That being said, I agree with you. There are some other things might be some interesting cases. Like one case, I would say, for example, Christianity in the southwest part of China, where Christianity, is very prominent among certain ethnic groups. For example, Nisu group, which is one of my main research group of people. It is reported at least 70% of this small group of people are Christians. And for them, of course, there's always a kind of a concern about their international relationship or 宗教渗透, infiltration of religion. But at the same time, they could be also used as a way to gain international support or investment, especially in the border side. Between the border of China and Myanmar, these groups and especially their leaders are considered, have more resources internationally, and also because of the fact that they have a very high percentage of Christian believers in the villages. In a way, the pastors sometimes play an even more important role than the local cadres. For example, if the government want to pass down some orders, they have to first go to the church and ask for them to promote or help to convince the other villagers to follow the government orders. So there are some, I would say still, it's very complex. We cannot develop a overall theory based on one particular case or situation.
Last quick question.
May I ask you to clarify, is there a difference between spirituality and religion? You use those two terms simultaneously in your presentation. Marx argued against religion. It's an opium, but he did not reject spirituality. He actually said that communism or socialism is a spirituality trying to introduce in all the communist states. Can you clarify, is China making that distinction? And you use Tao and Rujia as they are not necessarily religion. And that's highly disputed between different schools. Religion believes in a God, a deity, but Rujia doesn't necessarily so, although American foreigners always interpret it that way. So I think I'd like to hear clarification.
Thank you. That's also a very insightful comment. In fact, the whole idea of my presentation is kind of some reflection of the term 宗教 versus spirituality itself. I have to confess that trained as an anthropologist, I tend to blur the distinction. So that's why you can say I kind of use these two terms kind of exchangeably. But I do understand and also aware of the fact that most people kind of distinguish these two terms. And I do also see there are distinctions. But what I'm trying to emphasize in the case of China is because traditionally we don't, as you said, those are mostly considered philosophy. But in the process of, as I said, in 19th and 20th century, there is a need for categorization of kind of a project for the Western missionaries to understand those in their eyes looks like religion, but not religion. So as I said, in fact, 100 years ago, there was a very heated debate if China has a religion. If there's a religion, what kind of religion it is, and how these religions kind of manifest in the society. So that's why I briefly mentioned one of my favorite scholar, C.K. Young's work, the Chinese religion in Chinese society. Basically, he was trying to have this typology between institutional versus diffused. I want to say, I'm sorry, just one more, and I think it's because religion as a term already taken for granted for many people. I think that's still a valid and important term, but I think for us to understand the complexity of religious and spiritual reality in China, we need to, besides the term religion, we also need to look at those in the past probably categorized as a spirituality or even 迷信 to really take more and a thorough investigation. That's what I was trying to say. So.
Okay, our time is up. We want to give a big hand to Professor Huang for great talk.